a motion to reconvene?
I move.
Second.
And who was the second?
Hey.
Thanks, Jim. And on the motion to reconvene, Ms. Falcone Schubert?
Yes.
Mr. DeStefano?
Yes.
Mr. Falcone?
Yes.
Mr. Grunfelder?
Yes.
Ms. Goulan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Turkington?
Yes.
Ms. Polachina?
Yes.
And Mr. Francis is absent.
Okay. Can I have a resolution to approve the minutes as stated on the agenda?
I'll move.
I'll second. Any discussion?
I have to abstain from two of these.
So you say that. Jeff, can you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Falcone Schubert?
Yes.
Mr. DeStefano?
Yes.
Mr. Falcone?
Yes.
Mr. Grunfelder?
Yes.
Ms. Goulan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Abstain from A and B, and yes to C and D.
Thank you, Ms. Turkington?
Yes.
Ms. Polachina?
Yes.
And Mr. Francis is absent.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The superintendent's report tonight has the potential to be a little lengthy. I am going to pass on the Start Strong assessment report and do that last. In the meantime, Mr. Ray Sarinelli is here to present the audit to the Board of Education and the audience. And we're very lucky to have Kathleen Holloway from the New Jersey School Boards Association, who is our rep and does a very excellent job of that. And she will do a presentation on ethics. Ray, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
One second before it's done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, sir.
Sorry with all of you, I'm going to sit because I'm going to flip through my book a little bit. So I'm Ray Sarinelli, obviously from the audit company, Ms. Savaccia, and tonight I have for you the 2022 audit report. Obviously a lot going on in the audit report. It's a thick book, it's very detailed, and I would say my industry has done no favors to the average user of the audit. Over the last 10 years, there have been some very complicated standards that have been passed, and particularly related to your pensions, not your pensions, pensions in general. And the requirements to detail all of that results in a lot of very detailed, complicated disclosures, which I don't want to bore you with, but really don't affect your decision making. Everything that you do is on a budgetary basis, right? So when you see reports throughout the year, they're on a budgetary basis. The reports in the audit are on a budgetary basis. That's how you make your decisions. So that is what I have in front of you is the Schedule C1, which is the most accurate representation. And I say most accurate, there's even adjustments we make on the C1 for some disclosures that don't actually happen through the financial statements that the state asks us to disclose. So it's the most accurate representation of what actually happened during the year. And so what Schedule C1 is an income statement. So it's about 12 pages, and in the audit report, it starts on ends on page 91 and starts on page 80. And so when you
say
80.
Oh, thank you.
Not that detailed. Pretty detailed, but not that detailed. So in Schedule C1, you start with your revenues, right? So it's an income statement. It shows all of your revenues for your year, all of your expenses for your year, and then that boils down to your fund balance, and we'll get to that. So your revenues for the year are primarily made up of local taxes, state aid, and then there's also some miscellaneous revenues in there. So some good things happened in 2022 related to your miscellaneous revenues, some income coming in from the sale of some assets, things like that. Those are good things when revenues are higher than budgeted. Also, your extraordinary aid came in higher than expected, also a very good thing. You'll see towards the bottom third there, all of those on behalf numbers. Those are the things I'm talking about when there are disclosures, even on this statement, that don't actually happen in the district. Those are just, they're payments made on your behalf by the state. So what they do is they want you to disclose them as a revenue and as an expense. I don't know why they want you to do that. I think they want to get credit for making the payments on your behalf, but so they make you show an unbudgeted revenue and an unbudgeted expense.
Could it be for federal aid purposes?
For them,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so. Possible. I don't know. So those are, so it looks like you have an unbudgeted revenue of $5.7 million. That never happened. $5.7 million didn't come in. On the expense side, there's a $5.7 million unbudgeted expense. That never happened. That all happened at the state level. It's just a disclosure on this schedule. So those are your revenues. So the remainder are expenses, right? So your expenses are fairly detailed, and you follow the New Jersey chart of accounts. And so when I flip through those expenses, what I see is what we call a little bit of a budget crunch. You have been losing state aid over a number of years now, which is coming to its conclusion in the next few years. But so as you lose state aid, your budgeted expenses need to be reduced as well. That doesn't always mean that those expenses don't exist. It means the budget is reduced for them. And so that is what we call budget crunch. The expense still exists, but you're no longer budgeting for it, which means you're relying more on your fund balance. So we'll get to that in a minute. So because of that budget crunch that you're experiencing and some of the related after effects of the pandemic, your fund balance decreased during the year $1,376,161. So, expenses came in higher than revenues by that amount. Obviously not a great thing when that happens, a little bit expected for what your district is going through right now with the related loss of state aid. So the fund balance at July 1st was $7,431,401, and at June 30th was $6,055,240. And so if you want to just focus on the handout that I gave you, we're now just focusing on that. And so in the audit, it's not presented as I have it presented here. I thought it would be nice to see a little bit of a recap of the last 4 years to see the effects of how things transitioned through the pandemic. So if you look your total fund balance, and now I talk about fund balance like everybody knows what it is, but just in case, fund balance is like retained earnings in a business. It's the biggest indicator of how you're doing financially, right? So when you see a downturn in the fund balance, it's not a great thing. However, in your case, it was fairly expected, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So as your state aid has been reducing over the past few years, we went through a little pandemic. I think we were all paying attention when that was going on. And so what happened as a result of the pandemic was school was obviously not operating the same way that it always has. And what happened was there weren't as many expenditures as would expect it to be if the school was functioning completely and wholly. And so what happened was that because there was a reduced expense, the fund balance grew. You weren't spending as much, there's more balances lapsing, the fund balance is growing. So that's what you see, 4.8 million in 2019, up to 6.3 million in 2020, and then all the way up to 7.4 in 2021. Now, in 2022, school has operated a lot more normally, and a lot of the expenses have come back to their regular how they were historically. However, you have continued to lose state aid all throughout the pandemic, even though your fund balance was growing. And so now we're seeing that downward trend. And so at the end of 2022, the fund balance was $6,055,240, as I mentioned. And so statutorily, you're allowed to break that whole fund balance down into categories. And so I'll start with the capital maintenance reserve and unemployment compensation reserve. So the capital reserve is designed for exactly that. If there are capital needs of the district, you can withdraw from that reserve as needed to pay for capital type items. Withdrawals can also be done through the budget process in order to make purchases. So maintenance reserve is the same thing. It's a little bit more difficult to use the maintenance reserve because a lot of times what you think you are really maintaining, you're actually buying a new capital asset, and the state wants you to use the capital reserve, not the maintenance reserve. So there's a little bit more of a burden of proof to get a withdrawal out of that maintenance reserve. So the last one is the unemployment compensation reserve, and you'll notice that one was new in 2021. Again, going back to my industry, finding new ways to make things more complicated, that account actually operates outside of your operations. However, they want it to be disclosed with your operations. So it is an adjustment we make now in order to get the unemployment compensation reserve into this financial statement.
So would we refer to that as an off-balance sheet item? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
That's okay.
And I don't.
Questions are welcome.
I don't want to get too technical. I went through your audit report, so I think you should also have a prayer for me. And I have a good number of questions. What I'd like to do, instead of taking the time here, if the board approves, is write these out, send copies to the board, and send copies to you. There are questions that came up when I was going through it. I don't know the answer to those questions, but I'm sure you will. And does it please the board that I do it that way? Is that okay?
Yeah, I would send them to Scott. And then
I'm gonna send them to the entire board, Jeff and Mr. Sarinelli.
don't send them to Mr. Serenelli, just send them to Scott. Scott will send them
Okay.
to and then when he gets the answers, we'll all get the answers. This way, skip a step.
A quick question. Can you vote to approve this report tonight, even though you don't get the answers to your questions? I mean, if you can't, my point is if you can't, then I don't know, can we delay?
Jeff, are we bound to have this approved
Right.
by the end of the month?
Our odd sum needs to be submitted tomorrow. I have to look at the amended date for audit submission with the state because, as Mr. Serenelli mentioned to you, especially items with regard to pensions and things, the state pension calculations were due on July 1 of last year, and the state has still not turned those pension calculations over. So as we talk, I'm gonna look to see the new amended date, but where our February meeting falls may be outside of that window, but I'll check.
Supposed to have 9 months after the,
Yes, but the state has extended, so under statute, the deadline is the deadline, but the Department of Education recognizes that no school district can submit its audit without a modified opinion, without the pension information. So it has indicated to school districts, and council, correct me if I'm wrong, that school districts can submit up to a new arbitrary deadline that they've created because the state isn't timely in its obligation to provide the information to
okay,
school
so the
districts.
short answer is we could delay a month, probably.
The questions that Gerard or anybody else might have, I don't know if that's going to change the actual audit
No, I
itself.
understand.
I can't tell you that my question would be material enough. That's why over this past weekend, having gone through this mountain of paper, page for page, and I don't see anybody really feeling sorry for me.
I know.
Thank you. Some of them are just minuscule, some, so I don't want to make this a very lengthy session, but I would like the questions to be answered, and that would give Mr. Sarinelli plenty of time at whatever little leisure he has to go through and answer those questions. So my feeling right now is I would certainly vote to approve the audit report because it is here. But I think we could also reserve the right to make any adjustments if that were to become necessary.
That's up to the board.
Carrie, you can adjust an audit report after you approve it?
I don't know that the board can adjust
No,
its
board
audit
can't.
report, it's done by your independent outside auditor.
So why don't we?
So Mr.
Gerard-
Sarinelli would have to agree to it.
If Gerard had a point that Ray said was appropriate, then I would understand that.
Right, then
Okay.
Ray would submit, so Ms. Avancia would submit to you an updated audit. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen, but you could have an updated audit submit and then the board would approve that.
Is that a possibility, sir? I know it's
So it is a possibility. I am unaware of it ever happening before. But yes, I think
That's
that's
a
a
good answer.
possibility.
So let's see what the date is that we need to approve.
February 6th.
And then our next board meeting is,
Ken,
Right,
we
so-
need to
so-
approve it tonight.
so we'll approve it tonight, you submit your questions, he can get back to us, and then we can revisit it, if
Very
need
good.
be.
Yeah, I think that would be fine, and I also think that, I don't think the impact of the questions that I have are going to be material enough to significantly alter the outcome of the audit.
That's good.
Many of them are just things that I don't quite understand, because you have to realize, the audit itself is a very lengthy document, and I think the audit protocol for the state of New Jersey is 246 pages.
It's very
I
long.
feel like we're getting off topic. Okay, so now,
So,
we left
I
off
mean,
on the
that's-
unemployment compensation, can we move forward with that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, yes.
So it would be hard to categorize that as an off-balance sheet account, because this is an income statement, not a balance sheet. But as it flows through to the following schedules, it does eventually end up on the balance sheet. It ends up on the balance sheet, so I don't think it would be an off-balance sheet account, but it's accounted for in a separate fund. But for some reason, the accounting requirements require me to disclose it here. So that, I guess, would be the most technical answer I could give you. So let's get into the amounts for those three reserves. So you have the capital reserve at $907,472. You have the maintenance reserve at $249,700, and the unemployment compensation at $167,264. Just below that, you have year-end encumbrances of $651,318. A year-end encumbrance is very similar to what would be an accounts payable. The only difference is that these funds are just set aside for expenses. Accounts payable are usually goods or services that have been received. But so what happens with a year-end encumbrance is it's set aside as part of your fund balance and will be spent in the following year. So goods and services that are set aside for but haven't been received in the year that's under audit. Then we'll come down to the unassigned fund balance. And so the unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 22 is 4% of your operating expenditures with some minor adjustments. So you are allowed an adjustment for extraordinary aid and your non-public aid, which I don't think that you receive. So 4% with some minor adjustments. So if you look at that number, the fund balance is $1,891,009. And what you'll notice is, again, going back from 2020 to 2021, historically you were able to keep 2% of your operations as unassigned fund balance. in 2021, in response to the pandemic, the state of New Jersey said you were allowed up to 4%, and now that 4% is sunsetting back down to 2% at the end of this year. So if things weren't complicated enough, they gave you 3 years to have 4%, and they're now going back to 2%. So that's your unassigned fund balance. And the purpose of the unassigned fund balance is really, it's a cash flow mechanism, right? So you have a fund balance on your accounts that's really just offset with cash, so that throughout the year, there is a cash reserve on hand. In most other states, that reserve that you're allowed to hold is as high as 20%. So I'm not sure why the state of New Jersey holds you to that, but when you haven't done this in a long time, but when you go out for a bond rating and they look at your fund balance reserves, they always look at us and go, why is it so low? Statutorily, that's all you can do. So that's that. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I talk about it last because it's probably the most complicated, and that's the excess surplus. And what excess surplus is a drawdown of your own fund balance. Basically, you're using it as a revenue. You're using your own fund balance as a revenue to offset expenditures. And so if you look over the years, like if you go back to 2019, you have 1,073,203, and then the next year that number comes down, and then the next year it disappears. Then in 2020 you have 1,050,000, and then the next year that it comes down, and then it disappears. So it's a rolling balance, and what happens is it's generated after your budget is created for the year, for the subsequent year. So you have to use it in the next subsequent year. So whenever you have excess surplus, it's always a year behind, because we're doing the audit for June 30th, but your budget for that year was created in March of the year. So you're always a year behind on your excess surplus. And you'll notice what's happening is your excess surplus kind of grew in 2020 and 2021 as your fund balance grew, and now we're drawing down on that as we're losing state aid revenues and trying to offset them. So we're trying to feather out that loss of state aid so that the impact isn't really felt all in one shot, and hopefully we can try and get to a balanced budget without having to make any drastic decisions as it's related to the budget. So those are your fund balance categories, of what makes up your fund balance. I know we're going to go through some questions at some point, but is there any quick questions related to your fund balance, where you're at, where you're going?
It's never gonna go back up to 4%, is it?
From the statutory allowable?
Yeah.
Never say never.
I don't have a crystal ball.
Okay.
I would be shocked if it ever did.
Okay.
Ray, could you explain to us, going from 4 to 2%, where does that money go? Does it go to capital outlay? Or what happens to it
When you're going,
at the end of the year when it goes back to 2%?
So that's part of the long-term plan as far as your excess surplus. So as you can see, your excess surplus went from 1.5 million down to 600. I think in order to try and stabilize that and try and get it from going down to 600 to 0, we're going to move some money into excess surplus so you can continue to draw down on that. Now that's obviously a plan that's very difficult to implement as we're going through things. Yes.
The board is currently talking about a referendum, and certainly one of the items that the rating agencies are going to look at is the decline in excess surplus. Do you have an idea what our current credit rating is? If you don't, I'll put that in the paper and ask you the question.
I don't, and I would say because it's been so long since you had a rating, it wouldn't even matter. You would have to get a whole other rating anyway, because what the rating agencies do is they look at borrowers. So they look at people who have outstanding instruments, and because you don't have any, you haven't updated with them in a long time, so they have no clue what's going on in the Hopatcong. Your fund balance could be through the roof, it could be in the basement, they have no clue. So it really, I will go back and find it for you, but I don't think it will
No, I don't
matter.
think, no, it's no longer relevant.
It's not really relevant.
I don't think that is necessary, but what I hear you saying is that if we want to issue bonds, that we're going to have to be prepared to go through basically a fairly extensive review by the rating agencies in order for them to rate our debt before we can bring it to market.
Well, they would rate, they would rate, you know, the size of the issuance that you would be looking to do, but they would also be rating your financial statements on their overall, strength. Yes. And your ability, the rating is your ability to pay back, and that's what they want to know. Any other questions, quick questions on this area?
Not on this area, but I do have a concern that I'd like to share with everybody. Your audit report, Ray, is dated November 30th. This is now January 30th. So it's 2 full months that we're talking about this after the report was available. I will state for the record that this is the one most important financial report the Board of Education gets in any given year. And what I don't like and what I object to is the fact that, and I'm not looking to blame anybody, but if the audit report is dated November 30th, it's the property of the Board of Education, and I want that report on November 30th. As soon as it's ready.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that, I'm just making the statement because we basically have lost 2 months. And the other point that I'll make is, this is January the 30th, 2023. This report goes back to July the 1st, 2022. And as a result of your review of the financial situation here in the district, you make certain recommendations for things that we should look at, that we should correct, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those recommendations.
Jerry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your basic question is, if the report was finished on the end of November, why does it take 2 months for us to get the actual printout?
And I went past that, and what I'm saying is, the recommendations in the audit report could be as long as 18 months old. So I know this is a bit revolutionary, but I certainly would like to consider talking with the board and Mr. Hallenbeck about having take a deep breath, having the auditor come in on a quarterly basis rather than on an annual basis, because that way, if they pick up an issue that occurred in July, we would have the opportunity to take corrective action by the end of September.
Okay, but the issues at the end of this are pretty meager. I mean, they've done, over the last 7 or 8 years, they went from like 20 different issues they had to deal with, and now they're down to like 2 or 3. It's been an
Okay.
amazing difference.
Jerry, why don't you put that question on your edit? How long does it customarily take to get the report to the board when it's finished? And
We
then,
couldn't finish it because the state didn't give us the information necessary to finish it, and finally the state said, don't worry about that information, do a modified opinion. So it's not anyone's fault, other than the fact that we didn't have the figures that we needed related to pension costs.
I'm not looking to point blame, but in the private.
I know, but I'm
No,
just saying,
now you can understand
you're asking for something up front, but it wasn't ready because of that fact.
No, this report was ready on November the 30th.
So if I could just
That's
jump
when it
in.
was dated.
yeah,
So if I could
please.
just jump in there. So November 30th is the last day that we perform audit procedures. It doesn't mean that the audit report is ready
Okay,
for
good.
production. And we have one accounting cycle, which is considered 45 days to produce the report to you. So that is what we did. So November 30th was the last day that we performed any audit procedures. We finished writing the report, preparing the report, getting as much of the information as we could, and then we issued the report. The issue date, I suppose I could make the audit date the issue date, but then I would just be moving that date back to the date of issuance. It wouldn't really accomplish anything other than now
Can I
you're
ask you a
receiving.
question?
Sure.
Are you following the general practices of school auditors in the state of New Jersey?
Of course.
Okay. And that's typically what's done. The audit is dated at that certain time, November 30th or whenever the last date of your auditing activity is, and then produced to the board within about 2 months after that?
Right, that would be the and November 30th is just the date we were done here. My reports are dated all differently depending on when the last time we performed audit procedures. That is the date of the audit.
So that's, respectfully, I think that's when the board can expect to receive the audit, and that is pretty standard in my experience.
And Carrie, can you just speak about the quarterly audits from your experience?
So I don't believe there's any legal prohibition to the board doing that. I expect that it would be quite costly for the
Right.
board.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any boards that have the auditors in on a quarterly basis.
I'm not aware of that either, but I disagree with you in terms of it being very costly.
Okay.
Because my knowledge of the audit would mean that 1/4 of the audit would be done during the first quarter and it would be added to during the second quarter. So the price should be just about the same. But my overriding point is that if there is an issue that the board needs to address as a result of the auditor doing the work that he does, I would rather not have to wait 18 months if I could take care of it in 3 months. No, it's never been done, absolutely not. But it has been done, it's done at your firm.
My
on a
firm
quar-
is very
on a
different though
quarterly
than a,
basis.
right, my firm is very
And-
different than a public board of education.
Okay.
I think we're getting off topic.
I have the
again.
notes, so we can revisit that, we can have committees revisit some of the issues too, if we'd like, as a board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We can continue.
Okay.
Nobody else had any other questions
no.
pertaining to what Ray just said or anything in the report? Okay.
So one other area that I wanted to talk about was the area of state and federal grants. And I'm sorry I didn't get to prepare a sheet on it, but I looked at it very quickly. So this would be page 98. So this is your special revenue fund, and this is where all of your state and federal grants are accounted for. And they're accounted for on a, again, getting even more technical, on a reimbursement basis instead of a budgetary basis. But so what this is it reflects all the state and federal grants that came through the district. Most notably, on a year-to-year basis, you get the IDEA grant and the ESEA grants, which are your Title I, Title II grants, things like that. So obviously, as a result of the pandemic, there has been an influx of grants. And so just looking back at 2019, you received $833,000 of federal and state grants. So received and expended $833,000 in 2019. In 2020, you received received and expended 1.4 million of federal grants and 447,000 of state grants. So that's an additional $1 million worth of grants.
It's the last column on the right.
I'm sorry, yes.
That's 2022.
Yeah, you
Right.
are you comparing old numbers that you have
Right.
written out? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why I said I'm
Okay.
sorry that I didn't get a chance to
No,
put
that's
it
okay.
in writing.
No, it's all right.
But so in 2019, it was 833,000.
Okay.
That's it, federal grants. No state grants, just 833,000. Now, come to this year, you have 1.4 million, it's the last column on the right at the very top, and 447,000 of state grants. So it's an additional $1 million of not only expenses, but revenue coming in the form of federal and state grants. So if you think about that from a perspective of the amount of effort that the district has to go through to do that, in terms of that money flowing through your business office, you have curriculum people, your superintendent, all those people now writing grants, implementing the grants, ensuring that the grants are spent appropriately. So I think that's a pretty nice testament for the district to say that in 4 years' time, an additional $1 million of grants ran through the district and were implemented properly.
You know, I agree with that statement. The only statement that I would make is that that grant money is not as stable or could not be counted on to the extent that the other revenue. So there's no guarantee that 2.1 million or whatever will be there this year, next year, or
Can
the
we
following year.
continue to go through the audit? I feel like we're getting off topic again. I'm sorry, Jerry, but he's trying to explain this.
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Just keep getting off topic.
It's okay, we're gonna move on.
Okay. So then lastly, on the financial statements, I just wanted to talk about the Transportation Services Fund and the Food Services Program. And they're what we call enterprise funds or business type entities. So they almost operate as a business, but obviously you're not a business, you're a school board, so that's how these funds
Page.
operate. I'm sorry, page 102.
Yeah.
Page 102 and 103 actually is what we'll be going.
Thank you.
Actually, if you want to look at page 103, that'll be even better. I just want to do a little bit of comparison. So your food service fund, you'll see there at the very bottom center column is the net position or fund balance is $410,479 at the beginning of the year and $434,852 at the end of the year. So a nice boost in your food service program, primarily due to the seamless summer option grants that you were receiving during the year, really helped to boost the fund balance there. So that will probably stabilize off and maybe even start to again reduce in the coming years. The Transportation Services Fund, if you same thing, it's the first column at the bottom, was $1,213,857, and at the end of the year, $1,919,738. So a very big increase in the fund balance there. And the way your Transportation Services Fund works is you get a percentage of the revenue that comes in. So every account that you pick up, you get a percentage of that. So the more volume you have, the more the fund balance will grow. However, it should grow incrementally because as that revenue grows and the amount of accounts that are coming in, i.e. other school districts, it would becomes more and more difficult for your accounting department to keep up with that inflow of activity. I know they're working very hard because they improved their financials quite a bit over the year, but the increase in activity should be met with some type of increase in people to account for it, especially when your fund balance is growing pretty dramatically. It would allow you the opportunity to hopefully hire some more people to help you account for those things. Because if you look at the revenue, you have $52 million in revenue. If you think about that from a private business, they would have probably an accounting department of 10 to 15 people to account for that, and you're doing that with very few people who are working very hard to do that. So
That's the co-op.
So hire
That's the
more
co-op.
people,
Right.
is what you're saying.
it would be my recommendation. I'm not telling you to do it. Those are your decisions, but you know, the more people you have to account for those things, the better the financial picture is. The financial statement picture is, because you're ready and able to produce things on a quicker basis. So, you know, I know they work very diligently on the reporting because the accounting softwares aren't always jiving, and they work pretty hard to make sure that those things do work. I'd like to see that occur on a more frequent basis, where they're reconciling between things instead of just at the end of the year. But they do continue to work very hard to make sure that there's a proper audit trail for us to audit and make sure that the financial statements are ready for us to audit when we do come in. Like I said, $52 million is really bigger than your budget as the whole school district and just their section of it, so it's a big account. So that's the financials. There is the separately bound management report where we do have some recommendations that I do want to discuss with you. Anything else on the financials before we move to that? So if you go to this separately bound sheet,
Where might it be?
Actually, Ray, they all have that in an electronic
I was
format.
gonna say, I think
Oh,
it
I'm
was in the
sorry.
email, right?
Yep.
Is it in the folder that Brittany sent us?
Yep,
Okay.
it's,
Oh, no, in that case, I have some questions about this document,
okay.
just one.
What page?
Actually, at the very end. I guess it would be on page 147.
That's
Let's
good.
go.
Okay, so basically, this has to do with separation of duties.
Mhm.
All right.
Let us find page 147 first.
147 is the next to last page, or two pages from the last. Anyway, my question really is a concern. I'm sorry?
No,
No, you're
sorry.
fine.
Okay, so separation of duties. Now, you didn't come out and say it, but to me, this basically means that we really need someone else in the office to do this work.
So you would either need somebody else in the office to do the work, or you would need a mitigating control to separate the duties, which
I understand. All
we're
right, so
gonna,
now,
we're gonna
please describe
discuss.
What you mean by
In the
control.
recommendations?
Yes, so if you would like to discuss it now, we can do that, because
No,
that's
no, no.
actually
you
the
have
next
to-
thing I'm gonna
if
talk
it's-
about.
If you have to discuss it later, that's fine.
It's literally the first recommendation, so we might
Yeah,
as well
let's
talk
go.
about it, because that's what we're getting to. So that section of the audit that you're referring to is the single audit section of the audit.
Mhm.
And when an entity spends more than $750,000 in federal and state grants, you not only have a regular financial statement audit, but you have a single audit in which we singularly look at specific grants to do those audits. And so these disclosures are related to that, and did come up in the comptroller's audit from a few years ago, which is why we're dealing with them now and trying to get rid of them. What the statement says is that there's not an adequate segregation of duties in the payroll function.
Right.
So in talking with the administration, your comptroller's audit was for 3 years ending June 30th, 2020, in which different personnel were in place here and were not really operating by the policies and procedures always. So we talked about, we spent a lengthy time talking about, so what do you do now that is different from what you were doing then? And the new procedure that they're following is adequate for segregation of duties. There is multiple reviews and controls, and there are the specific problem that they had were that hand cut checks were not going through a proper approval process, where the payroll coordinator had too much responsibility that they could write a hand check to themselves and cash it. I still think it would have been caught, my opinion, but because it exists, we want to deal with that. And so the new payroll coordinator, I don't want to call them mistakes, but there's less need for hand cut checks. The proper direct deposit and the proper processing of payroll is happening, and the procedures for going through the system do require passwords in order to be approved. And then if there are hand cut checks, which are a rarity, there is an approval process where they cannot be distributed without review from somebody else. So that was a change in a procedure, however, which is happening during this audit. However, I can't rely on somebody telling me that's what's happening. I need to see the actual procedure being adopted by a resolution. And so when I talked with your administration about that, they said, this is what we're doing, can we get rid of it? And I said, okay, I believe you, but I can't get rid of it until you actually adopt the procedure. So I believe that is on for resolution tonight to adopt that.
It'll actually be February. Your standard operating procedure for hand checks in particular will be updated and approved by you to reflect the policy and procedure that's in place now, which requires the check to be both signed by myself and the superintendent, and a check log is kept for every single one of those checks before we enter it into positive pay with the bank, so that it can't be paid. So even if somebody attempted to circumvent that process, if I or Art haven't entered that check amount, payee, and check number into the banking system, it won't pay regardless of somebody's attempt at that as well.
Good.
So that's the process we actually implemented, but as Ray mentioned, it needs a board resolution for the standard operating procedure to approve it, and once you do, then that item is deemed in compliance.
One of the underlying reasons why I brought this particular point up is that we had exactly the same problem in last year's audit as well.
Right.
And so it didn't, apparently wasn't resolved
Well, so it was
then.
resolved, just
Oh, okay.
No
So
formal
it's a
action
hard-
by
not
you.
officially.
Didn't meet your standard, I got it.
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
The
So that's
process,
encouraging.
the
Yeah.
process
Oh, it
was
is.
changed, it just wasn't memorialized by
Formalized.
resolution,
Okay.
Right.
which means I can't get rid of the comment and
Mhm.
recommendation in the audit. And so, that is actually the first recommendation up in the sheet. So this single audit section doesn't have all the recommendations that the management section has, because they're two separate authorities. This is given to us by the state of New Jersey, this is given to us by the federal government, so two separate sets of rules that we're following. So these rules are a little more stringent by the state of New Jersey, the things that we want to look at. So that was the first recommendation. You obviously now know why it was happening and that it has been corrected. So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is that purchase orders are reviewed and approved prior to the order of related goods and services, and that all purchase orders and expenditures are reviewed to ensure they do not need to be reclassified. So what this is and a common name for it is a confirming order, where a purchase order is approved prior to, an invoice is done prior to the purchase order being approved, which it means, the business administrator needs to ensure that the availability of funds is there in order to tell you that you can purchase something. What we find a lot in school districts that have confirming orders is that there's nothing nefarious going on. It's just that a lot of people want to do the best they can and get something quickly. So they're like, let me go out and start the process for buying this before going through the lengthy requisition process. The problem is that the requisition process is lengthy for a reason. It is supposed to be difficult to expend taxpayer dollars, and so unfortunately it ends up in a recommendation because you cannot do that. I will get to you in just a second. So I will say that, so this recommendation is also a repeat. There were quite a few when we tested last year. We're down to 2 or 3. So in speaking with Jeff and the rest of the business office, they really are working at correcting this. It is a difficult thing to correct because unfortunately when people get used to doing things a certain way, especially when people are outside the business office and don't see the need for it, they just want to get things done. It's a difficult process to correct. So when we do find this, it usually does take a year or 2 to correct. I'm hopeful that in this case, when we come this year, we're not going to find any of those things. Yes.
Yeah, confirming orders always concern me, simply because of the fact that the funds are expended before there's any opportunity to determine that funds are available. In addition to which, the confirming orders are usually brought about as a result of someone who doesn't have the legal authority to make the purchase. So what you have to do is you have to come back and backfill something this is one of the reasons why I am so popular. What I used to do with confirming orders is I used to refuse it. I used to send the invoice back to the originating party and say that since you followed the procedure, you pay the invoice. That's why I'm no longer in the business. No, I'm not the only reason, but, no, it's illegal. I believe it's contained in Title VI of the Administrative Code. And it's always a difficult thing. It's always a difficult thing to do. I would venture to say that you could find confirming orders and all.
Excuse me, Mr. Blumenfelder, we're gonna let Ray finish, and if there's a question, we can add it to that list again. Okay?
I'm almost done.
But there's no question?
No, absolutely, it was a
Okay.
statement.
Okay, thank you. You can continue.
So then, the next recommendation that we have is that all appropriation transfers be properly approved. And so what we found here was, again, good intentions, but we need to see proper resolutions in order to approve these things. So when some of the sale of your assets came in and that money was appropriated, there was, when we read through the minutes, we see a lengthy discussion about it, but no actual action taken on it. And there needs to be an action taken on it to approve that type of appropriation. So again, good intentions, but just a little bit lacking on the execution, which is why we bring that to your attention. So we want to make sure that all those appropriations transfers get properly approved by the board. The next recommendation, it relates to the student activities funds. It is recommended that the district post all receipts collected to the accounting software in a timely and consistent manner, and that they review all checks which have been outstanding for over a year in the student activities account for possible cancellation and issuance. And so there's some stale dated things on your student activities account. Normally, student activities is where we see a lot of our recommendations. You get outside of the business office and you're not always dealing with an accountant who's reconciling the books, and sometimes things can get a little out of whack there. So I know the administration has undertaken opening new bank accounts and trying to clear out some of the older bank accounts to try and clean up a lot of these things, and to try and I believe they're also reviewing the statements to make sure that things are getting put into the system in a more appropriate and timely manner.
I see those on our agenda, right, for tonight under
Yeah,
finance?
all of the backdated checks from that activity account that exceed 1 year are on your agenda tonight for approval for disposition and reissuance. And then the second thing we're doing is we're moving our student activities accounts over to a standardized commercial accounting system outside of Systems 3000 that will allow for immediate access rather than it just being a standalone software on a secretary's computer.
And then Jen, did you have a question about the third one or no?
Well, that,
The resol,
yeah, about the money from like Hudson Max.
so do we have to go back and
make a resolution for that in order to get it off
or
the
just moving
recommendations?
forward, we will do?
It's more of a go forward.
Okay.
Okay, so that'll come off next year, is what you're saying. It's not one that's gonna stick around.
As long as you don't
Well,
appropriate
we're gonna do it.
without doing it.
Right,
We're good at it.
And we
That'll
we
come
could
off.
have things coming down the pike, so
Got it.
we'll remember to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's totally my fault. We were so involved with the initiatives that we had it all on the agendas in the committees, and I did not put it on the resolution. My bad.
So one thing I will say, and we touched on it earlier, going back, 4, 5, 6 years, there were some pretty significant recommendations and a lot of them. And normally when we come into a situation like that, and you have people trying to clean them up, they get so focused on these things, maybe something that was being done well before is not getting as much attention. And so as there's cleanup, more things come up, but you start working down to fine tuning and getting things in order. And I think that's where you are now. Things are getting close, we're fine tuning. The recommendations that I see are not like life-changing, and I'm very concerned and things like that. Things to improve, still things that we're finding but continuing to improve And so the last one is recommendation 5, and that is that the district requests fixed asset appraisal company to report all their assets at the original acquisition cost, the actual year acquired, and provide a recapitulation of the current year ending balance from the prior year ending balance. What we find with fixed asset appraisal companies, the way the accounting standard is set up is that your fixed assets are recorded at their historical value. Again, the accounting industry really providing, some good information for you. They have your high school building probably recorded at a few $100,000 because that's what you purchased it at. How that provides value to anybody, I don't know, but that's how they want to record it. The fixed asset appraisal company knows that. They know that it's not providing value to anybody, but I need to disclose it in the report that way. It's not important to them, but it's important to me. And if I can't disclose it that way because they don't really care or they're not providing you the information in the way that I need it to be presented, they don't really care. You have your insurance values, which are accurate, and should there be a loss, you have backup to provide you for that, but your accounting disclosure is not up to par. So I have to comment on that. That is not any one fixed asset appraisal company. I would say they're all really not great at providing that information. Some are better than others, but just something I have to comment on. I wish, they spend so much time on pensions. I wish they spent maybe 10 minutes on fixed assets and would just let us disclose that at insurable values, but that's
So
just.
Ray, that situation would really get in your way of depreciating the property properly?
So for newer things, yes, but again, so that's an accounting disclosure, and in some cases, your things that you're purchasing are appreciating in value and we're depreciating them. That's a more global topic for accounting in general, but yes, it would affect the depreciation. For the most part, we are able and spend more time than I would like recalculating and depreciating assets because we know they exist and are ensuring that what's in your audit report is accurate. But I shouldn't be doing that to fixed asset appraisal companies.
That's
Should be doing
Thank you. Thank you.
We do have 2 management suggestions that don't end up as recommendations, and so essentially what they would be is things that you're not doing wrong, but things that I would like you, that either I see in the industry as a whole, or things that I see that you're not doing wrong, but I would like you to improve upon. And so the first suggestion that I have relates to your transportation, the co-op, and we touched upon it a little bit, but big improvement in the accounting records, the reconciliation between the accounting records. I think you need to continue to be aware that that is a very important part of your operation here, and it needs to be a watchful eye over that. They should continue to prepare reconciliations as often as possible, and really, spend a significant amount of time ensuring that the financial statements for that fund are continually looked at. That's important. So even though I don't have a recommendation relating to it, they did the proper things that they were supposed to do during the year. It is such a big part of your operation. I think I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring it to your attention to continue to look at it. The other thing I have is something that we put into all of our audit reports.
What page?
It's in the smaller book.
The digital one.
And so that is related to your federal funding. We talked about how a large portion of funds came in, a larger portion of funds, and federal funding comes with its own set of regulations, and at some point, I'm not saying you will be audited, but there's the potential to be audited. So we want to make sure we continue to expend those funds in proper manner according to proper requirements that the federal government looks at. So you have a large amount of federal funds that have always been flowing through. I would, we do test those, and from what we find, you're operating in the way that you should, but we want you to continue to do that and bring it to your attention that there was a large amount of federal funds expended, which means at some point there will be audits of those funds, not from me, but from the federal government. They are not as nice as I am, and we'll scrutinize every single dollar that came through here. Not saying that will happen, just saying there's a potential for it.
Thank you.
So that's everything I have for you. You know, barring some of these additional questions, is there anything that I could discuss with you?
Yeah,
Everybody good?
I was present at the last village presentation,
Okay.
and I was thoroughly
Mr. Gru-
disappointed.
Mr. Grunfelder, we're going to move on to, we're gonna segue to give the students their awards. Okay, and then we'll come back to our speaker.
But I think this was a significantly better and more complete presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Nope, okay, yeah.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, see you again. Not to talk about my age, but my first administrative job in Vernon, Mr. Sarinelli's dad was the auditor. I need to go off the books a minute.
Before you start, just a quick question. Are you related to Frank
Yes.
Sarinelli?
Yeah. That's my uncle.
Ah, okay.
Depending on which
It's
one.
another
you're talking about.
accounting firm.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, then I'm done.
Is there a Miss
Sure.
Natalia in the office?
Have a good night.
Night, right, thanks. Thank you.
Come from a long line of auditors.
Yeah, that's sure. Yeah. Third generation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Natalia Lorena Roman. She is one of the students of the month for 8th grade. Let me read what they write about her. Okay. It says, "We commend you for always being willing to help someone else, which was shown when you made a video explaining the steps of registration for Principal Martinez and the guidance department. We also applaud your academic excellence for December of 2022. I'm very honored to present this little bit of award to you for all the great work you did. Keep it up. We look forward to see you again next year, the next year. God bless you.
Thank you.
that.
Natalia.
That's mine.
Thank you so much for that video. I didn't know you made it. You helped me register Rocco for his classes.
Yep.
Okay. We are gonna move on to our second presentation. Right, there
Yes,
were the
and-
students here?
To that, for the very nice family here, please don't feel you have to stay here and listen to more of it. I saw Papa was chomping at the bit.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, I am going to I'm going to postpone my presentation on testing. I have 6 Excel spreadsheets of this size to go over. It's impossible to do tonight, so I'll do it next month. I would like to introduce Miss Kathy. She's going to talk to us about ethics.
Sure, thank you very much. I am very happy to be here, but I will tell you, the school ethics is pretty dense and comprehensive information, so I don't envy you for sitting through such an information-rich board meeting. And it's also hard to follow a student and the accomplishments that you brought, because I am always much more boring than students. But the good news is that I did bring a folder full of resources for you. So all of the information that we're going to talk about today is in paper, in your folder. So what I would also like you to do is to open your folder, and on the right side, the acknowledgement of receipt form. If you could extract that and sign that and get that over to Jeff, the board will have a record that it engaged in a discussion about school ethics, because you are required to talk about the Code of Ethics annually, and that's exactly what we're going to do about that. We're actually going to go pretty deep. We're going to talk about the School Ethics Act in its entirety, which is a piece of legislation that all board members need to know because you're beholden to it. I'm not an attorney, but by the very nature of my work, I am steeped in the School Ethics Act, so like my colleagues at NJSBA and Field Services, we're very pleased to talk about this with our boards. If you need advice on any of this material, or especially conflicts, your board attorney is an excellent, probably your very best resource. That being said, board membership is a team sport. My name is Kathleen Kellawa, and I am part of your team. I am your field service rep with NJSBA. All boards have to join, and part of your dues is you get the services of a field service rep. So we work as dear Abbeys. If you've got any questions that you have for us, give me a call. And we also come out to boards and provide this type of training. I was a board member myself in Warren Township. All the field service reps were. We can't serve on our local boards and work for the association at the same time. So I'm not at the dais anymore, but I think about boardsmanship all the time. So, and I love it. It's a great gig, and I do applaud you all for taking it on. This is an evening where I like to talk with boards about what I call your best friend, which is the School Ethics Act.
Should we like sit over there instead of, so we can see this?
If that is more convenient for you, by all means do. Now, I will tell you, all the information on the PowerPoint is in your packets. I went a little out of order, just for ease of presentation, but I will try to go through it very efficiently. What I will tell you at the outset is that if you don't even remember anything that I say tonight, right, you can read it later, but go on the School Ethics Commission's website. There are, the web addresses in there. That is that's the best way to learn about school ethics, right? That's where you see the School Ethics Act in action, because you will see and you will read all of the ethics opinions that the commission, which we'll talk about in a minute, issues for, quite a few years, and their advisory opinions. So I'll talk to you about how that actually works. The School Ethics Act itself, it's a law that school board members are beholden to, and it's 9 pages of legalese. I have a copy of that in your folder too. But this will kind of help to illustrate what that looks like in practice. But again, the School Ethics Commission's website is really one of the best ways to get your sea legs on this. And the School Ethics Act, what I truly appreciate about it, and which our public truly appreciates about it, is not only is it about holding the trust and confidence of the people who put you here, but it issues a standard set of standards for every school board member on every public school board in the state, including charter schools. So Patterson has the same standards as Hopatcong, has the same standards as Newark, has the same standards as Cape May, has the same standards as Liberty Charter School, right? All of us need to be held to the same standards. And there are a few things here now. The School Ethics Act is for school officials, and that's certificated administrators in your district and yourselves. But not all of the Ethics Act applies to everybody. All of it applies to you as board members. So you have to sign disclosure statements that come from the state. Probably all of you are familiar with them already. You have to abide by becoming aware of conflicts of interest and recuse yourself from any situation where there may be a conflict. Those are the same for everybody. But school board members themselves have a special part called the Code of Ethics that only you are beholden to, because that's a job description for you, which we'll talk about. And also you have to complete your mandatory training. Only school board members have mandatory training, right? So the School Ethics Act established all of these things. The conflicts of interest, what the training requirements are, what the disclosure statements are, what the Code of Ethics is. That actually came 9 years after we had the School Ethics Act. And also the commission, the body that holds you accountable, who enforces this. And it's a board that meets in Trent. Well, lately they've been meeting virtually. They may be back in person, I'm not sure. They meet monthly, if they have a quorum, sometimes they don't, of 9 or less members. They are volunteers. They are not paid for their work to listen to allegations of bad board member behavior over and over and over. I'm sure we're all jealous of them. But they have a very important job, and the governor appoints them. So this is when they're fully staffed. You can see that there are 5 people. The majority of the people on the commission have nothing to do with public schools, right? They don't run a public school. They don't govern a public school. They do not sit where you sit. When the commission is fully appointed, there are 2 school board members on it, so 2 kind of kin, but only 1 is on there right now, and 2 school administrators, typically superintendents. We have 2 superintendents on there right now. So just kind of looking at that, you know that the majority is looking at these cases from a non-school official lens. And when I say these cases, what am I talking about? How does the commission do its work? They issue advisory opinions, and they decide on ethics complaints. So an advisory opinion and an ethics complaint are two different things, one much more friendlier than the other. An advisory opinion is just that, it's advice. When you go on the School Ethics Commission's website, you will see a list of advisory opinions. And as you read them, you can tell those are board members who are asking for advice. What should I do? Am I conflicted in this particular area? Here's my situation. And you can ask the commission for that type of advice about yourself or a fellow board member who sits around the dais with you. You can't ask about Patterson, right? You can only ask about Hopatcong, and only Hopatcong can ask about Hopatcong. And when I say Hopatcong, I mean the people around the dais, school officials here, not members of the community. And that's only appropriate because when you're looking for advice, it's on something that you are meaning to do in the future, right? An agenda item that's coming up that you're going to be voting on, something like that. And when you do ask for that, it's not a form, there's no money, you just write to the address on the website, explain what's going on. Next meeting, they read it, they debate amongst themselves, and they decide and they send you back the advice. And it is never punitive. Even if they say, no, that wouldn't be good, you're gonna need to recuse yourself on that, they just trust that you're going to follow their good advice and everything is all good, that you'll recuse yourself. And if the commission says, you know, this advice is something that other boards may face that they could benefit from, they will publish it. At least 6 of them have to vote to make it public. They'll scrub all the details out so you won't know who's asking or what district, but it gives the general advice that's really good for school attorneys, for field service rep to know, for NJSBA attorneys, and for board members to know, to get a feel for, you know, like I said, what the School Ethics Act looks like in real time. So those are your friends. We love those, right? Ethics complaints, however, are a totally different ball of wax, and that is typically what you hear about. Ethics complaints. I'm going to file an ethics charge against the code of ethics. What do? That's the ethics complaints. That's that domain. And that is when the horse has left the barn and you've made somebody angry. So they're going to file an ethics complaint against you, and they can. Anyone can. That could be a fellow board member, could be a teacher, could be a parent here, could be a good governance watchdog. Doesn't even have to be a resident of the state of New Jersey. Could even be one of the commissioners on the School Ethics Commission, all of those people. So we want to make sure that you don't become a subject of the School Ethics Act, which is why I'm very happy to come out and talk about it and give you all this material. But once a complaint is filed, it has to go through an awful lot of channels. You know, everybody lawyers up, costs the district money, and I serve all of Sussex County and Warren County. My districts don't have this kind of money, right? They really don't. Could be really used for many better purposes, right? But we go through it, we do what needs to be done, and at the end of the day, the commission determines if there was a violation, and if so, they will recommend what penalty. They can be punitive, right? And the Commissioner of Education decides on their recommendation. So here's what they look like. They go in increasing order of severity from a reprimand to a removal, right? And a reprimand is just, quote unquote, a letter from the Commissioner of Education that says what a bad board member you are, and it goes on their website, but other than that, it stays between you and the commissioner, more or less, and the person who filed the complaint. So that's the lowest end. A censure is where, yep, you did something wrong, you get that letter, but also your board president has to read from the dais about what a bad board member you are. Again, if it gets even worse, you could be suspended from a certain number of months from the board, right? You could also be, under egregious circumstances, removed from your service. And I will also tell you this, there's a slide in this package that tells you what training you have to get. We are seeing more people removed for not taking their training, which is very sobering. We also had in the county a case where a board member was removed for not filling out their income disclosure statement. They were taken off. So these formalities that are in the Act, be familiar with what your obligations are. You could be facing a severe penalty. And I know you're all here to serve the kids of Hopatcong. They need you. They don't need this nonsense. So just be, you know, careful with that. Now, when you look at the School Ethics Act, it lays out what a conflict of interest might be. If you are, if you are presented with a conflict of interest, it doesn't mean that you can't serve on the board, but there may be issues before the board that you can't discuss or vote on. So here's how it looks, and some of these seem pretty obvious, like a gift, that's offered to you with intent to influence. That's a problem, right? I guess we can kind of figure that out. But some of the other things, like, oh, I don't know, what is exactly service that may prejudice independent judgment? Does it, that can get kind of fact sensitive. So your best bet, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time talking on this, if there may be a conflict, ask for input from your school attorney. That will keep your nose absolutely clean. And in your PowerPoint printout, you'll see two of the recent decisions in which board members did not recuse themselves where they had a personal interest. And one got a reprimand and one is likely going to get a censure. The commissioner has to decide on that one. Hasn't done it just yet. But also when we're looking at a conflict, we have to know why, believe it or not, where our family members work, immediate family members and relatives, right? So what I want you to keep in mind is that an immediate family member is either your spouse or dependent child who lives with you. That's an immediate family member. And my dad does not live with me, so as far as the School Ethics Commission is concerned, he's not my immediate family member. But he is a relative. And you'll see in that box all of those people, right? Your stepchild, your half-sister, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents, your parents, all of these people related to you by blood, marriage, or adoption, that's your relative. And you have to be aware of whether something involving them comes before the board and if it makes you conflicted or not. One of the easy things to keep in mind is that if you have a relative or an immediate family member who works in Hopatcong School District, right? If they get their checks from the Board of Education, you are conflicted from any kind of vote on your superintendent's hire, compensation, contract, or evaluation. You're out completely. You can serve on the board, and a lot of times people are elected when they have somebody belonging to them working in the district. But you can't participate in any of that. You also can't hire a relative or an immediate family member. So even if they would be great for the job, except in very, very narrow circumstances, Art can't even ask you to vote on somebody, right? If they're belonging to you, nope, can't do it. When it comes time to negotiations, this chart in your packet comes from this advisory opinion, A2417. It came right from the commission and it's very handy. But what it's telling you is that if you have somebody who works in the district, immediate family member or relative, you are out of negotiations from start to finish. But if someone in your immediate family or you yourself is in, let's say, the teachers union in their local district, Cedar Grove, for instance, you have to sit out negotiations here until the final vote. When the contract's all ratified and the memorandum of agreement's there and you've got, your salary guides, then you're back in for what is typically the final vote. If you've got someone in that big pool, like your niece or your grandmother or whatever it is who works in Cedar Grove, you are probably in from start to finish. But notice those little asterisks. So run it past your attorney because there may be something called, heightened union involvement or some other kind of conflict. Yes?
Isn't it possible to ask for an advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics before you may make a misstep or do something wrong?
As I just said, yes, absolutely.
Oh, you said that.
Yeah, no, sure, yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad to make that clear. But some things are pretty evident that your attorney can lead you through without having to go through, the weight of an advisory opinion. But here are some of the advisory opinions that were issued in 2022. They were heard in 2021. Basically, someone whose ex-spouse worked in the district could not participate in negotiations. Aunt-in-law, well, who knows? It's not an automatic conflict, so an aunt-in-law is kind of a stretch, they let her go in this case. But these are really fact sensitive, they really, so go over these relationships with your attorney. And here are some people who got slapped for not recusing themselves when their family members or relative presented them with a conflict. Fine print, not gonna read it to you, read it when you have a chance if you like. But I do want to spend some time on the code of ethics, because this is the core of the School Ethics Act for board members. This is your job description. This is how and why we do what we do. So if there are subsections A through J. A is an easy one, or at least it always was an easy one before the pandemic, which is that you will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. So if the State Board tells you you've got to do it, you've got to do it. Court order tells you you've got to do it, you've got to do it. The law tells you you've got to do it, you've got to do it. Otherwise, you're in violation of the School Ethics Act. And I don't mind saying that in public, because a lot of times the public misperceives what a board's role really is, and whether our hands are tied or not. So it's a very timely subsection to present in public. If the State Board tells you to do it, you can lobby, you can make statements, but you kind of have to do what they tell you to do. But B is much happier territory. This is my favorite, because it explains why you're here, why you're sitting at this table. You are here to make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of all children, right? You're serving your community. You could serve on the library board, maybe you do. You could serve on your town council, you could, serve in, a number of different ways, but you're here for the kids of your school district. And that's a beautiful thing. It comes with a lot of responsibility though. So when we think about subsection B, you have to realize that you're not here just for the special education kids, right? You're not here just for the gifted and talented. You're not just here for your children and their friends, but for everybody. And it's as simple and as complex as that, right? But that's a beautiful thing. So again, I give you all kudos for doing this and for abiding by B. C tells us how we do that, right? We confine our board governance to the 30,000 foot view, right? And here it's policy making, planning, and appraisal. And you probably remember from your new board member orientation, if you've gone through that, there's 4 duties of a board: policy making, planning, appraisal, and communication. Well, the Ethics Commission doesn't care that much about communication as opposed to these 3 things. So just keep your job tailored to those duties and you will be good. And remember that it is a board, it is a team sport. It's not just you. And the 30,000 foot view means that you are not going to run the schools, but with your fellow board members, you're going to see that they are well run. Your administration will run the schools. They will take care of that for you. But also, you will not, knowing that, you've got a group here, right, that you are a part of, that makes policy changes, that approves your budget, that approves your strategic plan, all of that stuff together with a majority vote, right, with a majority vote. You will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education. And your authority, although everybody in town and in the schools and in your family looks at you like you are on the Hopatcong Board of Education because you are, when you leave this dais, you don't have any more authority than anyone else. So you have to act that way, right? You can't go into your child's, back to school night and say, well, I'm on the board and these bathrooms are filthy, or whatever in heaven's name you're gonna say, I think you're on your phone too much, whatever it is. You have to recognize that your authority is only in play at the dais when you are at a properly advertised public meeting and you're voting on agenda items. And the other thing that you have to note on E is getting violated an awful lot, is that part where you're not going to make any personal promises or take any private action that may compromise the board. And this comes up a lot with social media misbehavior. When you are on social media, your field service rep actually advises against social media. Really, it just can get you into so much trouble, right? Especially the interactive stuff, right? Where you have a Facebook post and someone on the community is trying to reach you about your opinion on this or that, or what do you think about this education? You're in dangerous territory there because you're not at a board meeting. If you're at a board meeting and you're discussing a particular issue, absolutely bring your individual viewpoint to the table, discuss it with your board members, your public hears it. But on social media, it's just you, and you're not the Board of Education, so you have to be very careful.
Don't we have, the right to free speech?
You do have free speech, but you need to balance it with the School Ethics Act. Because you are a public
So you
official.
say the School Ethics Act supersedes free speech?
I did not say that.
Well, what is
It
it?
is a balancing act. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that anything that you say is not perceived or wouldn't be justifiably perceived by a reasonable member of the public as you speaking for the board. And that can be a very fine line to walk. You can walk it. There are ways of doing it. And there is a disclaimer that the School Ethics Commission has published. It's in my presentation, actually. That if you use that, and if you abide by what it says, you should be able to keep your nose clean. I will also tell you that you should read the School Ethics Commission cases that are on the website, because there's a lot of examples, right, that you can learn from. But one of the cases that really comes to mind when I talk about this and using that disclaimer is a gentleman who was looking to endorse someone for board candidacy, right? And you can do that. But you have to say that you are making the endorsement, or in this case, you're putting this, opinion out there as yourself, right? That you are a member of the board, but you're not speaking for the board, you're not speaking for its individual members, you're only speaking for yourself, right? You do that, okay, you're in good shape. But this gentleman, he was writing on one of those local, tap into or catches or whatever it was. It was one of those hyper local things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he was endorsing someone who was not an incumbent. She was running against an incumbent. So not only did he say how great the candidate was, but he also said how bad the incumbent was. And he said things along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, but just slightly, when we sit at the board table, or I'm so embarrassed to sit at the board table with her and her votes stink and this and that. Well, guess what, dude? You're not speaking as an individual anymore. You're speaking as a Board of Ed member. So the walk did not match the talk, and that guy got slapped with an ethics charge and
Did he
violation.
still put in the disclaimer
He
statement?
did. He put the disclaimer,
Right.
but he started saying, oh, I'm
Yeah,
sitting
I
at the
got it.
board table and vote. So you have to be careful, right? I mean,
Better off not saying anything.
yeah, as passionate as you may be. You know what? Out of all the people and all the students that are served by the Hopatcong Board of Education, the Hopatcong School, only you guys are allowed to speak. And when there's a motion and a second and a discussion, only you can participate in that. And that's a big deal. And that's where the board does its work. So your field service rep who has been where you are, right, who has a Twitter account, but I put like poetry and songs on it and stuff, really advises you to honor that. Keep that sacred. That's a really important duty. That's what you were put here to do. I'm not going to say I'm jealous for you during the pandemic. That's been really rough. But I'm not a decision maker. You are, and that's a real honor. So keep it clean. Keep it clean, and that'll keep you clean with good old E too. And F, keep politics out of it. Okay, that's what this one is about. Your own individual judgment is what you use here. G, very verbose, but it comes down to two things. No leaks. If it's said in executive session, if it's confidential, you keep it confidential. You don't even tell your spouse or your dog or this or that, because you never know who picks up on that. And in all other matters, you'd be truthful. We're even having problems with that truthful part too. It's like, these are dark days sometimes, friends. H, I love, because this is why you can have a board of lay people. I had a career in banking. I don't know how to hire a teacher, but my superintendent sure does. And in fact, you need the recommendation of your superintendent to make any of your hires. And I is a beauty, always has been, but wow, during the last few years, absolutely, to support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Not that you wouldn't want to do that, but you will find, in fact, you probably already have found, that people will come up to you, maybe at a Christmas party or on the soccer field or at church or in the supermarket, and try to tell you about complaints about particular personnel, their daughter's teacher, their son's coach, this and that, they're on their cell phone, they're not nice, they don't play enough, blah, 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 and you cannot participate in those conversations. Rely on say, I can't do it, I really can't. But for those people who are trying to get some help that way or opine that way, you lead them through the chain of command. And you had a question, Jerry?
Yes, I do, thank you. Are members of the Board of Education, under any circumstances, considered school personnel?
Are they considered school
School
personnel? They are board members, and they do not work for their school district, so they are not personnel as far as employed. They are not personnel, they are board members. They may be school personnel in another district, but not here. But not here. However, I smell a question that you probably, if there's ever a question on where a board member is conflicted or not, you probably want to talk to your school board attorney, right? Because there may be, and again, the public doesn't really.
Did you intuit that question from me?
Perhaps I did. I don't know. My mind works in mysterious ways.
Thank you.
But I will tell you, just know your chain of command. Use a lot of finesse. They're not approaching you because they're bad people. They just want to know, right? They just want to know. So help them with that. But when you do receive complaints, because you do, make sure your superintendent knows about it. And that's it. No, no follow up with me. No, here's her phone number. No, fix this right away. Just tell them, and you're done. Okay? And then you're good. Volunteering in school, right? That's something that I just want to point out. There's a bunch of advisory opinions on that. And it's interesting because a lot of us came up through the, to board service through volunteering in the school, PTO and all of that stuff. You can still be on the PTO. You can still be on the executive board of your PTO. It's a separate org with its separate bank account. That's important. But if you're volunteering for Hopatcong, Board of Ed, right? Then you have to start asking yourself some questions. What the School Ethics Commission wants to make sure you don't do is it doesn't look like you work here. You're not enmeshed in the building. That's in quote. That's actually from one of their decisions. So one-time chaperoning, Read Across America Day, Career Day, that's perfectly fine. But something that wouldn't be fine is starting up an archaeology club. You can't do that. Can you be a homeroom mom for the PTO? Yes, you can. Can you be a Girl Scout leader? Yes, you can. Rec commission uses the same kids, same building, right? You can do that because you're volunteering under a different organization's auspices, right? And when you are in the school, you always have to be mindful that you are a board member, so don't make it look like you're working there, right? So be careful, you don't want to start barking orders at teachers or kids, that's not within your role, okay? Again, not to turn something good into a bad thing. Interview committees, if you read these two decisions, A31 and A15, you get what the School Ethics Commission thinks about interview committees, and I will tell you they don't like it at all. They didn't give it an outright no, but I will tell you the superintendent is in charge of the hiring process. So if the superintendent requests that you serve on an interview committee and not the other way around, that's okay. But there are guidelines from the Ethics Commission that you need to abide by that are outlined here.
I don't think we've ever done that, right? As far as I'm concerned.
Most of the districts I serve do not, but again, it's up to the superintendent, right? So let's see here. Here's some other things that you can read at your leisure. Yes, leading the teacher who was, said she didn't want to go to school because she was afraid of COVID, but was in Cancun, right? So that's kind of interesting, and complaints about that. So here's just a couple points to consider. When the commission gets a complaint, they review it in the light that's most favorable to the complainant, and also we're seeing a lot of these. I think it's actually the first one on the page right now. A lot of board members have been using this as a, I don't know, like as if the commission's gonna be a referee, like they don't like each other, they can't get along, and they're filing ethics complaints against each other. And the commission's like, no, we're not gonna do that. And not all bad behavior is an ethics complaint. You go on there, we have 2 board members, one said she was gonna punch the other board member in the face, and that's not an ethics violation. It's not good, but the commission's not getting involved in that one, guys. So use it properly. I would say that to anyone who is listening. Here's your training slide, new board members, Gov 1, second year Gov 2, third year Gov 3, and every time you're reelected, you take the legal update. Only NJSBA provides it, and we do it online, we do it in person, all sorts of things. Ask me and I'll help you register that, but our website also tells you that. I'm not even gonna talk about the penalty process because you're all gonna take your training, and I will remind you, do those disclosure statements. As soon as you get them, fill them out, because if they bounce back and you're on the deadline, it could be difficult. I also mentioned social media here, and your guideline, we've already talked about it. But really think, what is someone gonna think, a reasonable person gonna think if they read this? Is that gonna reflect on the board? And if not, then stop yourself. But always use that disclaimer. It's right there verbatim. That came from the commission, and I believe that the caps are from the commission. I don't think we added that emphasis. I think that was there in the decision. So they really do mean business on that. And you know, what you say will come back to haunt you when it comes to election time. And that's kind of that. So what I would also say is keep looking at your school board notes, because if there's any court cases or interesting things about the, you know, the law that you need to know, it'll be in there. Keep touch with your attorney, you know, make sure your board president knows where your relatives work, so you keep your collective bargaining agreements clean. And remember, you know, it's a team sport. I'm happy to help you, your board president, your superintendent, your attorney, we're all on the same team. So let me know when I can be of, and thank you for your attention through a very long meeting. I really thought you all fall asleep at me tonight, so I appreciate that. And Jerry, you have a question?
Yes, I do. You sat through one of our meetings, and I'm not going to ask you your opinion about the meeting itself, the content, but how about the process?
You must forgive me, I was not tuned in. I was not tuned in at all. I was multitasking. Please forgive me. I mean no disrespect at all.
Well, we do record them, so we can send you a copy of the recording that you can sit through.
Okay,
It's on
well,
YouTube.
well, lucky me, and I will be happy to
We'll
do
look forward
that
to
if
your
I have the
feedback.
chance. But you know what, Jerry, honestly, if you guys have questions, just give me a jingle. I am at your disposal, my card is in there, and the questions that you call me up with, they're completely confidential. We don't keep a record of who calls when, send the district a bill, so, and I'm at county meetings too, and I love to work in Sussex County. So thank you very much for having me and for your attention.
Thank you very much for coming.
We have our student representative here tonight.
Hi.
And I had sent an email, actually you and I had talked on the phone regarding, is the SBA going to give us any kind of guidance on the responsibilities of the board and the student, and that you were gonna come up with some kind of position paper.
You know what, I was aware that you were asking that question. Did you see our School Leader magazine that just came out? If you haven't, you're gonna love it, because the front page is an article on Board of Ed student representatives.
Perfect.
So that's the main story. It's also online, so go online to
Okay, very good.
NJSBA, and you should do that too, because that's cool stuff. You want a folder on school ethics? Very exciting. You know what, ask Phil, he may want to give, you want, but thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, guys, and thank you for your tech help.
Can we just give this back to Jeff, it looks like?
Yeah, I'll take your
exactly.
forms at the end of the
Okay.
night.
Oh,
Very good.
pass it down. Very nice to see you, always a pleasure.
Taking one of these, I'm gonna post it in my office.
Oh, you did? Thank you.
Jeff, do you want one of these guys?
Keep one.
All right, sounds good. You're welcome.
Yeah, I stole yours. I don't wanna write in red.
That's a guy.
Not too much of that in school, Joe?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, too much of it, right.
Yeah, my entire academic career was all red.
This way,
You don't want me to.
No.
Okay, we are moving on to 7B. Second reading and approval of the superintendent's HIB report.
I'll move.
I'll second. Is there any discussion? Jeff, can you call the roll?
Ms. Falcone Schubert,
Yes.
Mr. Stefano,
Yes.
Mr. Falcone,
Yes.
Mr. Grunfelder,
Yes.
Ms. Gulon,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes on A, abstain on B.
thank you, Ms. Turkington,
Yes.
Ms. Polachina,
Yes.
and Mr. Francis is absent.
Okay, next we're moving on to acknowledgements and correspondence.
Students of the month. It's a pleasure to have Ms. Natalia here. She is an outstanding young person. Honorable mention, grade 8 was Nicholas Hardman. Grade 9, Antonio Sudak. Honorable mention, Madeline Osmus. Grade 11, Brendan Villar. Honorable mention, Leila Gonzalez. Lizania Gonzalez. Gabrielle Hull. Gabriela Samito. Grade 12, Abdul Kareem Sheikh. Honorable mention, Julia Santiago. Very good. God bless them. The following students were chosen as the Hopatcong High School Scholar Athletes of the Month: bowling, Glenn Davies Jr., ice hockey, Jack Luciani, sophomore. Congratulations to their nephew. The students who went above and beyond to fill the bucket with caring this month.
Great, great. Do we have any parent, teacher, organization representatives here that'd like to do a report?
Can I talk about the?
I know you're gonna get.
Yeah, I just have to talk about that. I have to talk about the Harlem Wizards event. Harlem Wizards event is February 16th. It's just 2 weeks away. Every student should have received an email. Every student in the elementary school should have received a flyer to buy your tickets. Please go online and buy your tickets now. It's a silly, crazy, fun event. We have teachers from every school participating as faculty members. We have one of our own board members, Joe Falcone, who will be our referee for the night. So come see your favorite teachers and staff members play against the Wizards. It's a fun event, and you can buy your tickets online now. Thank you. Please come. And thank you for your attention, everybody on board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Giada was at the assembly
Assembly?
today, she danced in
Yeah.
front.
Oh, good, yeah.
Are there any other representatives
No.
from the PTO?
No.
Okay, moving on to public comment, I have two names. Ms. Padula, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Linda Padula, school counselor at the high school. I'm sure you're gonna explain it, but on the addendum, the resolution C. So, do we know how much money we're getting yet from that? Okay.
So which resolution?
What,
again?
C?
Resolution
On
C
the
on the addendum.
Oh, on the agenda. Sorry.
No, we don't.
Okay. When do the state cuts end? Is it next school year? Or-
Say it again.
When do the state cuts end?
Not soon enough.
Next fiscal year is 5, the year after that is 6.
And that's the last one, 6. And did we ever hear back about the grant that we had applied for to help cover the insurance increase?
Stabilization
Yes.
aid.
Yeah, we got $130,000, that's nothing to do with insurance.
Okay, so that's gonna be a problem then, the increase with the budget?
Everything's a problem with budget, and that's not an understatement.
No, I know. Okay, that was it, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linda.
Thank you. And we have Julia Santiago.
So,
Speak up, please, so I can hear you.
the president of NHS asked me to read the following message for the board. On April 21st, in honor of Earth Day, NHS would like to host a beautification day for the campus. Throughout the day, volunteer groups would be permitted to travel throughout the campus and do some spring cleaning to spruce things up. In addition to a good cleaning, the NJHS will join in and run a rock painting center to engage with the younger members of our community, as well as share a little color with Hopatcong. NHS would like to do it with conjunction with the board and have their support, maybe having the board offer which specific areas need beautification.
Yeah.
You want me to throw a mop around, is that it?
You can't
Okay,
mop.
it's okay, I just didn't do it.
Great.
You okay?
Yeah, we had, beautification days listed for this school year, so that makes sense to do it around Earth Day. So sure.
And I have hospice and other plans that can definitely go in.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All right. I would like, or Ken, is there a motion to move the entire agenda? We will give you all some time to peruse. We will have discussion.
Yeah, I hear you.
But the idea is to look through the agenda, move the whole thing after discussion. Do I have a motion?
I will
Motion.
move 11 through 17.
Excuse me?
I will move the entire agenda,
Including the addendum?
including the addendum.
You have a second?
Was there a second?
I second.
Jane, a second.
I have,
Wait, is this discuss, you wanna discuss?
yes,
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so.
yes. It's a.
Is there discussion? Yes, Jerry has discussion. Go
It's
ahead.
a comment on the bill list, that would be 11 Finance A. There's a discrepancy in the number for the bill list. The general fund amount is $750 short. It was a very easy oversight. It took me a long time to do the reconciliation. So if we could make the adjustment from 104.8, 390.12, and add $750, then we would be, what's the expression, cooking with gas?
All right, that's Jeff.
Why don't we let Jeff look into that while we continue?
I'm just doing the math right now.
All right.
Okay? We'll come back to it.
May I show Jeff where it is?
Jeff, do you need assistance?
You're looking at the total on the bills list?
Yeah.
Is there any other items that you want to discuss?
I got a quick question.
Yes.
About, what's F? Yeah, 11F?
11F?
Yeah, it's not a big,
You'll
deal.
get
Just
it.
curious.
Ice
cream.
Curious. Ice cream machine, all of these things, are these things that I wanted.
Knew you were
No,
worried
I'm just
about
kidding.
No, you don't.
I
The
assume they'll-
entry on the bill list was
I'm just curious, are these things
245,
still
so it
existing, or
neglected,
are we
picked up
selling them? What are we doing?
750. And
So
so
we're writing
the
them off
amount
and
that
then
should
closing
have
them
been
because they're not usable.
entered in was, it is not a big deal. And I
Anything
would
else
have
under
thought that
finance?
automatically would have picked it up. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but you know, I'd love to point the finger at you and make you look like the, you know, the dumb shit.
Yep.
No problem, I got it.
You want me to leave it here?
Nope, I got it right now.
Any
Curious
questions?
about item H.
We're good.
Okay.
4710.
You're okay with that?
Yes,
Is this a replacement?
Yes,
Okay, so
I'm
somebody
not-
retired or?
yes, and he was.
I'm not
he was
trying to
struggling
play
with
your gotcha. I
getting
went
his
through every
certification in order.
fucking entry and
She added that check, it says contracted services for transportation, she added it at the end of the run, and didn't update it here.
Any other
No problem. I'm good.
discussion under personnel? All right, so I'm on,
Wait.
okay,
Yeah.
travel and professional development. Any other concerns?
Are
Matters for
these like
discussion?
going forward?
Which one?
So the personal development, like the reimbursement, so they come to us for approval and then we approve it and then they go?
No, they go and finish first, then they get a reimbursement.
But-
You're talking about the course approval and reimbursement? Yes, they have to finish the course with a certain grade in order to be reimbursed.
Got it.
Do we approve it before they take the course? and then they get reimbursed, so there's like a process?
Most of the time, yes. Sometimes we get a late one, the course might have started a week or two, but
Okay.
Got it, thank you. And the professional development as well.
yes.
Policies?
5536, I just had a concern, Mr. Di Benedetto. Did we ever get any kind of confirmation from the MRO regarding the list of drugs to be tested? I know we're pretty much stuck with testing all of them, but do we have to maintain the gig that is, if they fail one of these other tests, other drugs, which I have indicated that we really should not be testing at all, based upon government recommendations?
Because you use the government recommendations and because I thought you did an excellent job of understanding them, the MRO works for the drug company, so I don't know what we're gonna get for, he works for the.
I understand. Okay.
I think he did an excellent job on that.
You're okay with it? I'm okay with it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that was.
And I did see
good
your
job.
change, the one change you put in, which is
Yes,
fine.
I edited it,
Yeah,
yes.
that's fine.
Okay. Any other issues with policy or regulation, Student services? Resolutions?
I have a question about A.
On the resolution?
Under resolution.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
So these are students that are not living in Hopatcong.
Yeah.
How long have they not been living in Hopatcong?
They've lived in the background. These are kids whose families relocated who are seniors and want to finish. They have proof of residence as to where they are now. It's a temporary item. Board policy allows us to do it after a certain date.
And they've already been paid for
Their
it.
senior year.
Well, I mean, have they been out of district for like 2 years?
No,
and they
No,
were
no,
just-
no, 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 no.
Okay,
This is like,
Like they're finished, they moved during their senior year,
Got it.
and they're finishing it.
thank you.
Okay? Any questions about the co-op?
not going to acknowledge what a great group of people we are.
Is that on here? Oh, this is the special month. You're all great, thanks for coming and sitting through this.
Is that a resolution?
Yeah, where is the?
Oh, my vote is no.
Okay, and then any items on the addendum? Any issues? Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. West. Hearing none, can you call the roll, please?
All right, so just to clarify, I have a motion to approve items 11 through the addendum. A motion made by Mr. Falcone, seconded by Ms. Gulon. Ms. Falcone Schubert, how do you vote?
Jeff, before discussion, one item.
Yep.
The resolution that Gerard brought up, is that is
Oh, yes.
appropriate?
Oh, yeah, I made the adjustment to the bills list. We're off by $750. There was an additional check added to the check run that did not get reflected in.
Do we
in
need a
the
motion
warrant.
to revise that?
With your permission, I'll make the adjustment right on the minutes itself to reflect it.
I think it can
Thanks,
just-
Jerry.
Thanks, Gerard.
Go pick up.
Thank you.
I like that reflected in the minutes.
It's speech videotape.
I
Speech
read it.
videotape.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Ms. Falcone Schubert, 11A through the addendum.
Yes.
Mr. DeStefano?
Yes.
Mr. Falcone?
Yes.
Mr. Grunfelder?
Yes.
Ms. Gulon?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Do you want to do me last?
Sure. Ms. Turkington?
Yeah.
Ms. Polachina?
Yes.
Mr. Francis is absent, and back to Ms. Johnson.
Are you ready?
And hang on one second so I can get
Here.
the notations in here. Go ahead.
11A, B, C, D. These are all my abstentions, okay. 11G, H,
Okay?
12A,
Okay?
13, 14B,
Okay?
15, A and B,
Okay?
just make sure, I think that's it though. And the rest of it, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, we're gonna move on to board member comments. Since it was a very long evening, I'm not gonna have any comments. If anybody feels the need to say something, let me know now. Otherwise,
I
we will.
just want to say congratulations to the Hopatcong competition cheerleading squad, who took first place in our division on.
Good team.
You all are good?
Yes, okay.
And one more time, Wizards, February 16th. All the elementary grades, they had an assembly today, so ask them about it. They all seem to be having a great time dancing and moving around and getting all wired up before we send them back to class. Great.
Love you, teachers.
On my right.
Make sure that appears in the minutes as well. I just wanted to say that I found this to be an extremely productive and cordial meeting. I think we covered an awful lot of territory. I'm very pleased. And this goes in the minutes too, Jeff. I would like to compliment Mrs. Falcone Schubert for having run the meeting as smoothly as she did, because this was her first time.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Third, second, third.
All in favor?
I vote no, and I like my vote recorded.
Okay, we're adjourned at 8:55.
Night, everyone. Good
Okay.
She left her flash drive.
I'll get it back to her. At my next county meeting.
Oh, God, last month? Yeah, last month. Oh, it's February.
Sorry.
That was everybody's last day.
Yeah, well, he's been there since, if I'm 44, he's
Thank you, Jerry.
45.
Okay, shut up.
And he was the, if I'm not